The Jags, what a rough finish to the season. If you watched Football Night in America, our friend Steve Kornacki using PFF projections and probabilities and everything, last year, right around week 14 or whatever it was, whatever the time period was, last year there was a point where the Jags only had a 3% chance to make the playoffs. And then they made it with the late season run. This year, they had a 96% chance to win it at that same point, and they did not make the playoffs.
A few weeks ago, they had the number one seed, like in their own destiny.
They were 8-3.
They're out of the playoffs.
They went to play Baltimore.
Right.
Battling for the number one seed.
They literally had it in their own destiny. If they had won out from that point, they would have been the number one seed, and instead they are out of the playoffs entirely. Easton Freeze had a tweet that said, in 2022, the Titans were 7-3 and ultimately got knocked out of the playoffs in Jacksonville in Week 18. In 2023, the Jags were 8-3 and ultimately got knocked out of the playoffs in Tennessee in Week 18. So the two division rivals have traded favors / eliminations.
We have to talk about it from a Jags perspective first, and then we'll give the Titans their credit, of course. But from a Jacksonville perspective, the difference between this one and, say, Tennessee last year, Tennessee lost Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. The roster was starting to kind of fall apart a little bit. You could kind of sense it and see it. With the Jags, have they had injuries? Absolutely. And their quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, has had 5 of them in the last 7 weeks. That has coincided with things. But the Jags are supposed to be this up-and-coming franchise, year 2 for Doug Peterson. Trevor Lawrence in year 3, he had taken a big leap last year from a performance standpoint right around midseason and was a completely different player down the stretch. And so it was supposed to be different for the Jags. So this one just hurts more, I think, for Jacksonville because, it was supposed to be the next stepping stone. And halfway through the season, it looked like, okay, yeah, last year they snuck into the playoffs late, win the division. That's great. You move, and now you continue to get better. They were the favorites to win the division this year in a division that should have been wide open, right? Anthony Richardson was out for the season. We didn't know what Houston was going to be. We knew Tennessee was in this rebuild, and Jacksonville just a blown opportunity for them, and they had opportunities in this game as well.
Yeah.
That they left on the table.
Yeah, a huge one late. Now they were kind of only in the game because Tannehill decided to throw an interception right to the middle of the field safety against a heavy blitz. Now, it was a really nice read by Cisco, but, literally a safety sitting there in the middle of the field. It's the one player that can actually impact the throw you're trying to make, and you basically throw it right to him against a heavy blitz. That's a huge turnover at that point in the game. Tennessee had this game fairly well in control, and that gave Jacksonville a chance to bring it back. And then, early, it was like, the thing about Jacksonville is that they've been kind of they've been the architects of their own demise all the way through the season in terms of mistakes, and it's been a little bit like Kansas City. In fact, remember early in the year against Kansas City, they should have won that game and didn't because Trevor Lawrence put the ball in receivers' hands in the end zone like 4 times, and not one of them resulted in a touchdown because guys kept getting only 1 foot down or couldn't quite keep hold of the ball until they'd gotten, a foot stepped out of bounds and all those kinds of things. And this game was just another example of that, where they're just inches off. And even in preseason, you saw preseason or training camp, you saw that Ridley or Lawrence to Ridley connection. And it's like, wow, that could be amazing. And it was just inconsistent. Like they couldn't hit it all the time. They went for it all the time, but it was really low percentage. They just weren't hitting that many of those plays. So there's a ton of highlights of it because when they did hit it, it looked spectacular, but the strike rate was terrible. And this game, they had a Lawrence to Ridley bomb just like preseason early in the game. And then late in the game, they had it again and 6 inches too far. Like it just goes off Ridley's fingertips. If that ball is 6 inches less overthrown, it's probably a touchdown, and
we're looking at a 2-point conversion.
Right, it's a 1-point game at that point, or a 2-point game rather. You have the 2-point conversion to tie it, like a whole different ball game. We have a chance to tie the game. Instead, they miss that. They don't get it on 4th and 2 a couple plays later, and that's the game.
Okay, that's a lot of plays to unpack here, right? Because you talked about the Jags, setting themselves up for failure. It it was back and forth early on. Tajay Spears with a beautiful 28-yard touchdown on a screen. The Titans were screening.
I mean,
like crazy.
another game where like the run game was dominant. I mean, Derrick Henry and Tajay Spears were both amazing in this game.
Yes.
Again, for the second week in a row, right? That their run game has been crushing people. Did you see Derrick Henry after the game? They gave him a mic. They hooked him up.
You're going all over the place. Come on, let's just.
It's Derrick Henry.
Let's go.
It's following. It's flowing.
We'll get there.
They gave him a microphone and hooked him up to the stadium's PA system. I've never seen that before.
So we got to talk about that now. Yeah, Derrick Henry basically addressed the Titans crowd. He goes 19 carries for 153 yards. That's over 8 yards a pop, including a 69-yarder in there. Henry, Zeke Elliott, when did Henry come in? 1 year after Zeke, 2017?
He's had an 8-year career. Is that right?
Like Zeke, I think he's 1 year earlier than Derrick Henry. Maybe they were the same class. But Zeke is over there, not to pick on Zeke, he's over there in New England. By the way, Zeke's become like a pretty likable player. He's in this horrible situation in New England. It seems like he's having fun. He's playing hard. But Zeke Elliott's like not
same class.
Same class, right? He's not that explosive. And if he averages over 4 yards a carry in any season going forward, it's going to be like, we got something out of Zeke. Derrick Henry's still going strong.
I mean, Derrick Henry might still be the best running back in the NFL. It's just that behind that offensive line, you only get the odd glimpse of it. Like, I wouldn't rule that out as a concept.
And so Henry, by the way, Baltimore would be a great fit. I keep trying to put Derrick Henry in Baltimore just to see what that whole thing would look like. But Derrick Henry is still moving, and he's doing it behind a bad offensive line. And obviously he addressed the crowd, as you said. He's expecting to leave Tennessee going forward. He's expecting to be out of there, and it is actually going to be interesting because he is one of a handful of running backs who has actually made a big difference throughout the majority of their careers, and he's not really slowing down. He's at a point where running backs should have already slowed down, and he's not slowing down yet. So he's actually one of the few run game changers still available at running back. I'm not saying lock him up for like 4 years and $15 million a year or anything like that, but on like 1 year deals on these playoff caliber teams, Henry is going to be interesting this offseason.
Oh, he's a fascinating offseason topic because he has been the outlier. Like, he has been the guy that disproves all the rules about running backs throughout his entire career. All those cliches of, you give him the ball because in the fourth quarter he gets stronger. Like, you look at all those sort of survival chart things, and it doesn't exist for most running backs, but it does for Henry, and it always has. Henry has been the one guy that throughout his career, the rules do not apply to Derrick Henry. And even this year, okay, his production has been way down, but it's still been pretty good behind literally the worst offensive line in the NFL for 2 years in a row. Now he's over 30. I think he's going to be 31 next year, like at the start of this year. Or has he just turned 30? Either way,
30. I think he's just turned 30, and people, yeah.
But 30 being like way past the cutoff of like, forget it, you don't give this guy a new contract. But if we're literally describing this guy as he's already proven to be the guy that disproves the rule. Like, remember Adrian Peterson? Peterson went way into his 30s and was still really productive. And you're like, well, it's Adrian Peterson. The rules don't really apply. Like, you can't win MVP coming back off a knee injury. That's ridiculous. And he does because he was Adrian Peterson. I mean, Henry is in that kind of category. He's already shown that. So I think it is a discussion of, what kind of contract can we give Derrick Henry? Because I'm pretty sure in a good situation, that dude still absolutely cooks. There was a fascinating play in this game where he broke off a big run. Derrick Henry can buy extra yardage on a big run by simply threatening to initiate contact with a DB, right? He doesn't even need to do it. He can just lunge in their direction, and they're like, uh-oh, they've got to sort of get themselves set, to be run over by a 250-pound guy who's going to try and stiff-arm them to hell. It's fascinating. I've never seen that before where a running back doesn't even need to, go looking for the contact. He just needs to, threaten it, and the DB, it's not like he runs away, but he has to sort of back off and set himself so that he can try and be run over. And if Henry's not actually going to do that, he can get 5-7 yards extra running room without even making contact. It's a really interesting dynamic late in those runs.
I think you've summed Derrick Henry up really well. He has been an outlier over the last few years, so we'll talk a lot about him this offseason. Just want to go back to some key plays in the game here. So the Jags were down 2 scores. And with the Trevor Lawrence thing, I'm just interested in, when we came into the season thinking, okay, is he going to take the step to become one of these top 5 type of quarterbacks? Is he going to become elite? And look, I know he's battling injuries and the whole deal, but this was one of those games. It's 28-13. Can he go and do something special here? So they score a touchdown early fourth quarter. Didn't go for 2, by the way, so they kept it at the 8-point deficit there. And then there's a drive. Was that when the Tannehill? That was the interception. So Tannehill comes back, throws an interception. So now it looks like the Jags, okay, they're down 1 score. It's early in the fourth quarter. They drive to the 1-yard line, and on 4th and 1, Trevor Lawrence, how they say they called his own number. Literally does, because most of the time it's play call. Literally does call his own number, and we've seen this in the past. He's long and gangly like me. Trevor Lawrence, we've seen at other times, will abort the play call and just, with his long arms, go over the top on the goal line and reach in and score. And he's done it a couple times. I think he did in the playoff game last year against the Chargers, right before the half. And so he calls his own number. He aborts the play call, goes for the QB sneak over the top, and gets stuffed at the 1. So 4th and goal from the 1. Jags get stopped on what would have been, that was their first opportunity to try to tie the game in the fourth quarter. Then they come back, make another stop with Tennessee. I would want to give credit to Trayvon Walker, helped set up a Josh Allen sack of Tannehill with about 3 minutes left in the game. Then the Jags come back, and that was when they had the opportunity to hit Ridley over the top and missed him. And then the Jags, they had 2nd and 2 at the 2-minute warning, Sam, and then 3 incomplete passes. They miss Ridley deep. 3rd and 2, incomplete on a pass breakup. 4th and 2, Lawrence misses Evan Ingram. If you look at the thing I got coming out of this, and over the last few weeks with Lawrence, I've used difficulty level seems jacked up too high in this offense. If you look at the passing map, so many passes outside the numbers. And when they needed this 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2, they just run little 5-yard outs that seemed like extremely low percentage the way the Titans were playing them. I don't know what this balance is for the Jags. And I know they had the deep ball to Ridley available, and they missed it. But there's so many low percentage outside the numbers types of throws. Reminds me a little bit of early career Andrew Luck, where you'd watch, remember RG3 and Luck, their rookie seasons, and it's like RG3's thrown into an ocean of wide open receivers, and then Andrew Luck, it's like, man, I got to hit this 15-yard out precision. It just felt like they're playing different level difficulties, and this isn't. It might be Lawrence choosing these passes too much. There's definitely this element of he doesn't read it out all the way through. He's forcing passes to the wrong places. There's something missing there right now with Lawrence. But when you look at the passing map, everything's outside the numbers and just
wonder
missed opportunities there.
I wonder if this coaching tree is suffering unusually relative to some others with the current, defensive fighting back type of schemes. Like, are they? Because remember, this defense or this offense a few years ago was sort of in vogue a lot with the way the Shanahan one was, like the RPO heavy system, Andy Reid coaching tree. All of a sudden you had his sort of coordinators being poached or coaching staff getting taken everywhere. The Eagles going their run to the Super Bowl the first time around. And you're like, wow, this offense is everywhere. And then it all kind of fell apart for all of them. And now, okay, Peterson comes back and rebuilds the Jags, but we talked, a big part of that was just not being Urban Meyer. But now that offense doesn't look like it's going to get back to where it was when it was working so well. And every other place you see this offense or a variant of this offense going, it feels like it's missing something relative to where it was. I don't know if they're struggling more than some other systems against current version of NFL defenses.
Yeah, the whole Lawrence dynamic is interesting because I think Chris may have mentioned it when they were on Sunday Night Football. There are times when he's actually too quick. He's actually too quick to get to his first read instead of getting to 2 or 3. And I don't know. There's just elements of his game that I would like to see tighten up a little bit. So, yeah, at the end of the day, Lawrence had another good season and did not take that big step forward to become, one of the top 5 to 6, 8 quarterbacks in the league. Not saying he's not capable. He's still good. He battled through the injuries down the stretch, but it's got to be a disappointing finish here.
Yeah, the narrative for him in the offseason is going to be too harsh because earlier in the year, he was way better than his numbers looked because of all those games where receivers were screwing him, right? Like the Kansas City game, I think his grade was absurdly good, but it didn't look like it because nobody could finish a touchdown, right? He had 4 or 5 games in a row that looked like that. So there's a 4 or 5 game stretch where his numbers were crappy relative to how well he played. Then he was battling through half a dozen injuries and legitimately didn't play well, but I think you can fairly say that's an injury thing. So you put those two things together and suddenly you've got like an 11 or 12 game stretch of bad play statistically, all of which can be explained by that's not really where his baseline is. And yet no one will remember that when we're talking about it in the offseason. It's just, hey, look at the stats. Trevor Lawrence is mid. You know, that's going to be the narrative, and it's not
Trevor
really
Lawrence
true.
Mid. We'll help correct them. I just think this offense needs more of the easy in there. And I don't think there was enough of the easy in there. And to me, that's one of the
you know what they're also missing,
offseason.
Though? I'm not this. You could be forgiven for seeing that this season my analysis has been just give every team Nuke Hopkins. But Nuke Hopkins had a game where he made like a couple of spectacular one-handed grabs in this game. Generally had a big performance, even though the yardage wasn't spectacular. But like 7 catches, a couple of them were one-handed. The one thing that Jags offense is missing, it's a pretty good receiving core. Like between Evan Engram, who's developed into a really good receiving tight end, Christian Kirk, who's been injured, Ridley is still a useful player for them, and you saw the kind of impact he can have. It is missing that like one contested catch alpha dog who can just go out there and win speculative jump balls, right? They don't have that.
That's what I used to think when Lawrence, sorry to interrupt, but that's when Lawrence came out, that was like the first thing I wanted him to have. The way he threw the ball at Clemson.
I mean, he had T. Higgins.
And he gave those guys opportunities.
In college, yeah.
Maybe he'll have T. Higgins.
Right. But like that's what it's missing, right? You look at this and it's like they have a really good receiving core. Even if it's not, you know, I don't need like a true number one who does that in addition to the deep threat, in addition to everything else. But I think you do need a guy who you can just throw a contested jump ball to, because you don't have one of those at the moment. I don't know how much that bails a quarterback out to just have the certainty that, yeah, this is like only a 50-50, but what the hell?
And if we look at Ridley's history, I'm sorry, we're getting too far into offseason weeds here. They got him on the cheap. It was a good buy low on Ridley.
I think it's still a good addition.
But his history was like really good number 2 with Julio Jones on the other side.
Right.
When Julio left, Ridley was not a great number 1. And then this year, week 1 was great, disappeared for a while. You have a game like this, he still goes 106 yards and was wide. Like Ridley should have had, if Lawrence hit him, Ridley should have had about 160 yards and 2 touchdowns on 2 bombs, and we'd be like, wow, this was great. Great addition. But I'm just saying there was like too many disappearing acts, I think, for Ridley throughout the season and them finding ways to get him involved. So good job by the Titans, pulling the upset, ruining their division rivals, the Jags, like they did back in '99.
Tannehill, another guy that's gone in the offseason.
They didn't give him a mic.
No, they didn't. It's a bit harsh.
Brought them to the AFC Championship.
I was kind of surprised by how both of those guys, like how overtly they were just like, yeah, I'm out of here. Normally there's some sort of, well, we'll see how it plays out, you know, been great. Like there's some sort of like leaving the door open for a reunion. Tannehill's just like, yeah, you know, I'm gone. And Henry's, you know,
I'm sure
thanking the crowd and stuff.
Tajay Spears is going to be the guy next year.